Hey everyone, ready to dive in? We're tackling the Lean Startup today, Eric Ries's book.
Oh, a classic.
Yeah, we're going to unpack why those traditional business plans, they sometimes fail startups.
Right. They can be a bit, well, rigid.
Exactly. And we'll see how this whole validated learning thing can really change the game. It's like having a roadmap, but for, totally uncharted territory. We'll be using Ries's book, going through excerpts, looking at real-world
I was
examples.
using a detailed itinerary,
Yeah.
right? But on a trip where you're bound to hit some detours.
Exactly. You got to be ready to adjust. Speaking of, how does that apply to startups?
Well, Ries, he argues that clinging to a rigid plan in the startup world, it's a recipe for disaster.
Makes sense. Things change so fast.
Exactly. He uses the example of IMVU, his own company.
Oh, so he's got some skin in the game. Yeah, they wanted to build a 3D avatar add-on, for instant messengers.
Okay,
They had
interesting.
market research, a whole strategy, everything pointed to success, and but
Uh-oh. I'm sensing a but here. What happened?
crickets. Their assumption that people wanted this add-on, totally wrong.
Wow, that's gonna hurt. So what'd they do?
Validated learning to the rescue. They didn't stick to their guns. They started running experiments,
Yeah.
figure out what people actually wanted.
So they were testing their hypotheses in the real world, not just on paper.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Eventually, they pivoted. That's a key lean startup term, by the way.
I've heard that pivot.
Yeah, they ditched the add-on idea, created a standalone network instead. That's what led to their success. They adjusted their route, found a different destination.
Makes you wonder, though, is this just for tech companies? Silicon Valley stuff.
Common misconception. Reeve says entrepreneurs are everywhere. These principles, they can apply to any industry.
Okay, so it's not just about coding and apps.
Nope, take it to it. Massive company, they make TurboTax and all that. They use these principles too.
Really? What, like a 7,000 person company thinking like a startup? How's that work?
They built this whole system for running experiments, hundreds of them, testing ideas, adapting. It's about fostering that experimentation, no matter your size.
So it's less about the product itself, more about how you
What's-
adapt.
Exactly. It's about managing new information. That's entrepreneurship.
So it's not just about having a eureka moment. It's about constantly experimenting, learning.
You got it. Speaking of experiments, minimum viable product, the MVP.
Ah, the MVP. Isn't that just launching a half-baked product, though?
A lot of people think that, but it's not about cutting corners on quality. It's about finding the fastest, simplest way to test your biggest assumptions. Dip your toes in before diving headfirst.
So testing the waters before you cannonball in. Gotcha. Any examples of that in action?
Think about Zappos, the shoe company. They didn't start with some fancy e-commerce platform.
Really? How'd they start then?
They bought shoes from local stores, lifted them online. Simple as that.
No way. That's how a billion-dollar company started.
That's the beauty of the MVP. They validated their idea that people would buy shoes online before they went all in.
Smart, right. Testing the market without, like, betting the farm. So they're learning, adapting, but how do you even measure progress in this kind of environment? It's not like traditional business, is it?
You're right, it's not. That's where innovation accounting comes in.
Innovation accounting, okay. Another one of those Reesisms.
Straight from the lean startup playbook. It's about forgetting those vanity metrics, total users, website hits. They don't give you the full picture.
Easy to get caught up in the big numbers, but not really know what's driving them.
Exactly. Innovation accounting is all about the actionable stuff, the metrics that actually tell you if you're learning and growing, moving toward a sustainable business.
So less about celebrating those little wins, more about, like, are we actually making real progress?
Got it. Can you give me an example? How does this play out in the real world?
Sure, let's look at Crockett. They're an online test prep platform. They thought more features, more growth. Makes sense, right?
Yeah, more features, more value for the user. Seems logical. But they switched to innovation accounting and bam, they realized it was their marketing that was holding them back.
Really?
They were tracking things like customer acquisition cost, lifetime value, all that. Turns out people liked the platform, but they weren't reaching enough of the right people.
So they were building a great product, but no one knew about it.
Basically, they ended up overhauling their marketing, and that's what led to faster growth.
So they were focused on the wrong thing, like so focused on this one tree, they missed the whole forest.
It happens. Highlights why tracking the right metrics is so important. You got to know which engine of growth your business relies on.
Engine of growth. Okay, you're throwing a lot of jargon at me today. What's that mean?
Think of it like the mechanism driving your business's growth, the thing that keeps it going. Waze talks about a few different engines. Sticky, viral, paid.
Okay, break those down for me. What's the difference?
Sticky. That's all about keeping customers coming back for more. Think Netflix, Spotify, those kinds of things.
Hmm.
Their success depends on holding on to those users, making sure they don't leave.
So it's got to be good. So good they're practically addicted. Makes sense. What about viral?
Viral, it's word of mouth, social sharing. Facebook, Dropbox, back in the day, they spread like wildfire because each user brings in more users.
Ah, the network effect. So how do you figure out which engine is right for you? That seems like a big decision.
It is a big decision. Requires analysis, testing, all that good stuff. Most successful startups, they really excel at one of these engines, not all of them.
Focus your energy where it matters most. Makes sense.
Right. You got to identify the engine that fits your business model and then optimize for it.
So what happens when your engine's not working? Do you stick with it, or is it time to switch gears?
$1 million question right there.
Mm-hmm.
Pivot or persevere. One of the toughest calls an entrepreneur has to make.
And how do you decide? What tips the scales?
Data. Validated learning always comes back to that. You got to constantly be checking. Is your engine doing its job? Are you seeing the results you expected? If not, it might be time for that pivot.
So if you're spending a ton of money acquiring customers, but they're not sticking around, that's a red flag.
Exactly. Or if you're banking on virality, but no one's sharing your product, time to rethink things.
Honesty is key, even if it hurts.
It's not just about the product, though, right? This lean startup thing, it's about building a company that's adaptable, resilient, always learning, always evolving.
Building a culture, not just a product.
You got it. Ries talks about this technique, 5 whys.
5 whys. Okay, I'm intrigued. What's that all about?
It's a Toyota thing originally, I think. The idea is you get to the root of a problem by asking why 5 times, like peeling an onion.
So you're not just putting a Band-Aid on it, you're figuring out what's really going on.
Exactly. Say a customer can't buy something on your website, you can just fix the bug, move on. But with the 5 whys.
Yeah, walk me through it.
So why couldn't they complete the purchase? Payment system crashed. Why? Server outage. Why? Server wasn't maintained. Why? IT team's understaffed. Why? Company hasn't invested in IT. You see?
Whoa, so a little glitch turns into a major issue about priorities and resources. That's kind of scary, honestly.
Right. It's like that saying, for want of a nail. Small things can be symptoms of bigger problems. The 5 whys help you uncover them.
Like a detective tool for your business? I like it.
That's it. And it's not just about fixing problems. It's about creating a culture where you learn from those mistakes and get better.
Being proactive, not reactive. So how does this all tie back to the lean startup method?
The lean startup method is about building a culture where failure is just a learning opportunity, not the end of the world. The 5 whys, they embody that perfectly. Use those challenges to make your systems better.
Making me think about my own work, honestly. What assumptions am I making that I should be testing?
That's the question. Ries actually talks about this volunteer program at HP. They were struggling to get people involved.
So we're talking about, what, a company with thousands of employees trying to boost their volunteer program. Not your typical startup story, but it shows how these principles can apply anywhere, even inside a huge corporation, right?
Exactly. They were facing a classic lean startup problem. How do you motivate, hundreds of thousands of employees, 170 countries, to get involved in volunteering? It's a huge challenge.
Yeah, talk about uncertainty. You can't just send out a mass email and hope for the best. So how did they use the lean startup method here?
Well, they started with their assumptions. One big one was that employees, they wanted to volunteer, but they didn't feel connected to HP's actual values.
Makes sense. If you don't believe in the mission, you're not going to be super eager to volunteer.
Right. So to test this, they did a little experiment. They offered a small group of employees, long-term ones, special volunteer opportunity, very tied to HP's values, targeted approach.
So they treated their volunteer program kind of like an MVP, right? Test a smaller version first.
Exactly. Start small, gather data, adapt as you go. If this first group wasn't into it, they knew they had to rethink things, maybe pivot their whole approach.
Fail fast, learn fast. Much better to course correct early on than to launch some big program that totally flops.
Absolutely. And this just shows how even huge companies can benefit from thinking like a startup.
Yeah.
In fact, Ries talks about how Intuit, remember them?
Yeah, the TurboTax folks, they were already doing a ton of experiments, weren't they?
Right, but they realized their whole product development process, it was too slow, too clunky. The waterfall method, they called it. Ries calls this the large batch death spiral.
So they were stuck in planning mode, not reacting to what customers actually wanted.
Exactly. So they switched to working in smaller batches, releasing updates more often, getting constant feedback.
Lean manufacturing, but for software. Eliminate waste, streamline everything, focus on delivering value quickly.
It was a huge shift,
Mm.
but it let their teams have more ownership, experiment more, learn from their mistakes faster.
So they built this nimble, adaptable company within a huge corporation. Pretty amazing.
That's the power of this mindset. It's not just about the product, it's about the culture. You know, navigating uncertainty, learning from your customers, building something great, no matter what you're working on.
It's about the journey, not just the destination, right? So for someone listening who wants to apply this to their own work, their own life, what's the big takeaway?
Embrace the learning, the experimentation. Always
Yeah.
be asking, what am I assuming? How can I test that? What can I learn from it, even if it doesn't work out?
It's about being comfortable with not having all the answers. Be open to being wrong, to learning something new. Never stop experimenting.
And don't try to do it alone. Connect with other people, find some mentors, build that support system. Having people in your corner makes a huge difference.
That's great advice. And on that note, keep learning, keep experimenting, and we'll see you next time for another deep dive.